I guess I should just start, huh? Sorry, my
Yeah.
brain short-circuited there. Cool.
You okay?
Great. Sorry,
How
I
you
did...
doing?
whatever, God. Hello, and welcome
Hello.
back to America's Widows. Captain America is a fascist now. Kim, how are you?
I'm good, you know? Just
Yeah.
having a good time making my clickbait.
Hell yeah. Yeah. Please pay attention to us.
Weeding my clickbait plants on my clickbait farm.
Yeah!
Watered my little clickbaity finds.
I have a quick correction to make about something that I said in the previous episode, or one of them. I said that the show had a majority black writer's room, and then I corrected myself that it was all written by Malcolm Spellman. It is not all written by Malcolm Spellman. I was right the first time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and episodes 3 and 4 were actually written by the same writer as John Wick.
Cool.
So there, that's why the third episode is like that.
Derek Colston.
Oh wow, according to Wikipedia, his age is 46 and 47? I only have one age. Getting back into it, do you know what the Zemo Cut is?
I do not know what the Zemo Cut is.
The Zemo Cut is a 1-hour YouTube video of Daniel Bruhl as Zemo doing a little dance on YouTube. Because apparently, this is something that the fans were asking for, as then Marvel were like, sure, here you go. And this feels astroturfed to me.
Yeah. Like, why do the fans want to see Zemo do a little dance?
I mean, Daniel Bruhl is a delight. I popped on that video, and the thing is, it's an hour-long video, but it's just 25 seconds looped. But all the same, I watched it for the 25 seconds of it, and I was like, okay, this is fun. He's doing a little dance. And I said this on Twitter already, the people who are in the marketing department for this show are dead fucking set on marketing this show with silly little dances. They did this with Seb Stan and Anthony Mackie as well. That one of their things is that they just do a little dance to Rasputin. This is meant to be a relatively serious drama about American imperialism.
Okay, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
However, I need to see them dance to Rasputin because when did that happen?
Oh, look, you can look it up. It's just that nobody gave a shit. How did you find the episode, Kim?
I have mixed feelings about this episode. I think it had a lot of really good stuff in it, and I really liked the beginning and the end a lot. Like, a lot. I did a literal gasp and just sat there like, oh, through the credits. It was very, very good. I suppose very, very good is not... It's one way you could describe that ending. But as a piece of TV, I think it was very good. The rest of it was a bit disjointed, in my opinion. Like, I don't think it held together very well. It just felt kind of like this thing happened, and then that thing happened, and then another thing happened, which incidentally is also how I write plots, so maybe I shouldn't throw stones.
To quote Ready Player One, people who live in glass houses should shut the fuck up.
Stream Reading Player One.
Yeah.
Now available.
Yes. Stream Reading Player One, now available. I wasn't going to say it, so thanks for saying it. Giving me permission. Oh my goodness. I think this suffers from the thing that I do. It was going to suffer from where you make a TV show, but actually you're making a 6-hour movie, because that's bad, because that just means that the individual episodes don't have their own tones.
They realized that a cliffhanger was important and they put it in. But aside from that, there's just nothing. It's just a lot of stuff happens, and all of it is pretty decent, interesting stuff.
Yes.
Some bits of it a lot more interesting than others, and I like those bits a lot, but
Yes.
nothing actually, like, goes down in any kind of discrete sort of way, which is quite unfortunate.
So, speaking of, as an example of something that you did not find interesting, what's your issue with the power broker stuff?
Who cares about the power broker is my first issue with the power broker stuff. I mean, who are they? Why do I care about them? Who are they related to in terms of plot? Who are they related to in terms of theme? Why the hell do they live in Madripoor? So we have to keep thinking about that stupid place.
Yeah, it's a very half-hearted mystery box, I think.
Yes.
Now, having said that, it is a mystery box all the same, so who do you think the power broker is going to turn out to be, if anyone?
Well, I saw someone saying it could be Sharon, which I think would be very cool. But would make absolutely no sense with what we've seen so far. I think the most interesting idea that I have for who the power broker could be is that it is somehow related to the US government and or military. So it's
I was going to say the same thing, yes.
The power broker is the CIA, basically.
In the comics, he's a guy named Curtis Jackson. But the way they're building it up, the way they're playing coy about who the power broker actually is, I fully expect that it will be a particular character. And I do think it would make the most sense for it to be a representative of American military power. It's someone who's been installed by the CIA to destabilize Madripoor, but it will probably just end up being Sharon.
Well, that's disappointing.
Oh, well.
What if Sharon is a member of the CIA that has been planted to destabilize Madripoor?
And she's just been lying about being anti-patriotic. I think that would be disappointing as well.
This whole time? Yeah. This would all be very disappointing. What are other ideas you might have? It's Rhodey. It's just Rhodey.
Yeah, that occurred to me. I think that would not play off well against what Rhodey was.
But... Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, whatever, right? Rhodey's evil now.
That doesn't have unfortunate implications at all.
It doesn't.
It's Steve.
It's Steve! It's Howard the Duck. It's fucking...
It's the ghost of Howard Stark.
Oh god, he just shows up in like the political thriller context, and it sounds like, what the hell? And he's just like, you're out of luck until you've had duck.
The power broker is the Red Skull.
God damn, he's back from space, back from the woman murder cliff.
The power broker is Natasha, back from the dead.
God, sure, whatever. And then it's going to lead into Black Widow in theaters July, maybe?
I think this entire discussion has been more interesting to me than the power broker storyline has been. I think we should give some context to why we are structuring the episode this way. So, I know you were the one who came in with the comment that one thing that you really liked about this episode was how instead of having two sides, you have like, what is it, 5? 6?
Something like that.
Factions?
You have a bunch of different characters who want different things, and that's what the show actually is. And that contributes a great deal to the sense that this actually is a story about morally grey stuff that isn't trying to be completely didactic about what the right answer is in a sort of the good guy is right and the bad guy is wrong, or even the bad guy is right and the good guy is wrong. And I think that becomes most clear when Zemo and Carly Morgenthau, both of whom are villains in the mold of, oh, you can kind of see their point, start trying to kill each other because they're also opposed to one another. Because it's not just like there's one issue in contention here and everyone's arguing over that one thing, although that scene also shows that the show has a great deal of thematic unity, because like you have Zemo in play, you have Carly in play, and you have John Walker in play, who comes in just a minute after, and what they're all ultimately after is not only the super serum, but what that concept of, like, what pop culture has made of basically. The Nietzschean Übermensch. The idea, a superhero.
Who gets to be Superman is the big question in this episode, I think. Which, considering I just said it was very weird and disconnected, that thematically speaking, it is pretty good. And I think
plot
the whole Wakandan thing... Yeah, plot speaking, like, not at all. They show up for, like, the Dora Milaje just show up for 2 scenes and they beat some people up and then they disappear. And it's great. Sure, fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in terms of theme and character work, I think it's really interesting to have them here because I know, as you pointed out, Loafers, Bucky does have a very strong connection to Wakanda in general.
Yes.
And so does Zemo.
This is the first time we're actually shown that Bucky has a strong connection to Wakanda, other than a post-credits scene in Black Panther. This is the first time that something substantial is done with that, and the beat is earned. So now it's not just frankly, a weird hiccup in the sequence of events that has happened to Bucky Barnes. It's actually part of the dramaturgy.
Yeah. And I love what they do with the idea of him being there and being free. And I know he mentions it in the first episode where he talks to his therapist and says, I had some peace in Wakanda. And in the opening of this episode, we kind of see what that looked like. Like the really affecting scene right at the beginning where he's sitting with, was it Io? It's the same one, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And who's trying out the trigger words on him, and it turns out that it doesn't work. And he has this he's breaking down and she's telling him, you're free. And it's all very beautiful. Like, he's got the depression hair and he's sitting around a campfire and they're just sort of having a moment.
Seb is fantastic in that scene, I think.
Such a good scene. I'm going to watch it again.
So much of Bucky's whole deal and the performance that Seb gives as Bucky is a kind of understated sadness, the big mournful eyes and stuff. So it's this was a moment of emotional climax that's kind of been coming since on and off since 2014, really.
Yeah. And they do really have... I mean, they put in a lot of bits from the other movies, which I found really cool. I think this one scene does more to sort of unify Bucky's entire character arc than any of Captain America fandom people were probably expecting ever to happen ever again. I mean, it retroactively makes the whole Civil War thing actually feel character driven. We know it isn't, but that one bit where they tie up the whole trigger word subplot from Civil War, plus all the bits where Bucky's killing Tony's parents, and then intercutting that with the climactic scenes from Winter Soldier, and all of it is just very good. Thank you to whoever the fan vidder is who suggested this in the edit. You're a genius.
Yeah. Despite myself, I did catch myself thinking, wow, they just kind of made the gift set for us.
Yes, they did!
They sure did.
It's brilliant. And, what I find interesting about that is you get an immediate contrast between Io telling Bucky that he's free, and then in the present day, her asking him, why did you free Zemo? And that coupled with a scene later on where, Bucky gets literally disarmed because someone just dislocates his Wakandan vibranium arm.
Yeah, and this was the thing that you said, we gave you your freedom, what have you done with it?
Yeah, we gave you your freedom, we gave you peace and a home, and we gave you an arm, and you have decided to do this with the things that you've been given. And that ties really quite beautifully and tragically in with the whole concept of exceptionalism, of being gifted, of having power. And the repeated thing that they say throughout this episode is that people who have power will not be able to use it. It's a whole basic power corrupts kind of thing. But I think it's not so much that power corrupts as power is inherently wasted on the people who are given, who get it. And this is a sort of much softer kind of thing in Bucky's case than in the rest of the episode. But you do definitely get the sense of he's disappointing people that he looks up to and cares about.
Yes.
Which, fantastic, wonderful. Love that.
Fantastic, wonderful.
Great.
Oh boy. Now, one of the main people arguing that power corrupts and that power is wasted on the people that it's given to is Zemo, our villain who seems to be right about everything. How do you feel about Zemo?
He is so interesting. And it's really, like, it's not so much that I think he's right about everything, it's that everything he says makes me go, do I agree with that or not? Which I personally find even more interesting, because I have a lot of very strongly held beliefs, which is both a good and bad thing, I think. And I go into a lot of media going, I agree with that, I don't agree with that, I think that character's right and that character's wrong. And with Zemo, it's not so much that his morality is grey and sometimes he's right and sometimes he's wrong. It's that he will say these things and you'll be like, huh.
Yeah.
Is that right? It could be.
Can you give an example of such a thing?
Yeah. So his big quote from this episode is, when talking about Carly Morgenthau, she's a supremacist. The desire to become a superhuman is inherently entwined with supremacist ideals. And basically the idea that anybody who wants that much power must want it so that they can be better than everyone else, and that everyone else has to bow down to them because they are better.
If you work out, fuck you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Basically, sure. Fuck yourself, Claire.
I can see the logic, but I feel like, come on, all the super serum does is make you jacked.
Okay. I find it really interesting that, first of all, Zemo says this, Baron Zemo. He has a private plane. He's a white man with a private plane.
As if he's fucking working class or something.
But also, like, the immediate counter is the serum doesn't corrupt everybody. There was Steve. And this is so fascinating to me because, on the one hand, like, yes, Steve is great and we all love Steve. Like, I love Steve. And I think we're supposed to buy that Steve is a good example of someone who took the super serum and is, like, a great guy. But if you think about Steve's actions throughout the time that we've known him, the argument that Steve is a supremacist, not necessarily a white supremacist or anything, but just like a man who believes in exceptionalism and in special powers for those who are exceptional, and in like heightened levels of duty and responsibility and therefore power of people who have the muscles to back it up. Like, that is the plot of Civil War.
Yeah, like, it's tricky because in the first Captain America movie, we are straightforwardly supposed to believe that Steve is a good boy, and that's why he was given his superpowers by the American military, because he's a good boy, and he'll use them good. In the second movie, it's like he's stepped out of what he viewed as... I think it's useful to think about this more in terms of like stepping out of one kind of movie and into another kind of movie, where like he used to live in a black and white morality world and he stepped in, and now he's in a morally grey world, and he didn't know how to deal with that. And then in the third movie, he's a philosopher king.
Okay.
So, like the supremacist arguments and the idea that Steve Rogers is a good boy that never did anything wrong. This is something that slides about a good bit within the movies themselves, and even though you can kind of draw a line of continuity from First Avenger to Civil War, it's treated in a very different way, in the sense that the first one is directed by the guy who did Jumanji.
And the third one is done by the guy who did Avengers Infinity War, so I don't think, like... I'm coming around to the opinion that the only thing that Zemo is really guilty of is just being a massive asshole and, killing a guy. Which is not good, mind you. But like, as opposed to most villains in movies, not even counting comic book villains, like, his main motivation is that he believes a defensible ideological position so strongly that he's willing to kill people to get it. And that's, very sympathetic to me, frankly.
Yeah, of course. I'd agree with you there. Shout out to Prince Philip. Moving on to Sam and Bucky, two men who have never killed anyone for their ideological positions.
No. Oh, never. I mean, okay, it is arguable that Bucky has never killed anyone for his ideological positions.
Because
because he's killed a lot of people for someone else's ideological positions.
Yeah, I'm sure he never killed anyone in the war.
Was that an ideological position, or was he just...
I think his ideological position is that he thought Jenna Cohen was hot.
We've all been there.
That's my ideology.
Oh no. I mean, I feel as if maybe his ideological position during the war was very, like, get away from Steve and also me. But okay, fine, yes, Sure, he fought the Nazis, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start with Sam and Bucky? We've talked about Bucky a bit.
We've talked about Bucky a bit. Sam, you said that in DMs to me that Sam really comes into his own in this episode. I think it's interesting that Sam has his main big scene in this episode, which is a good faith conversation with Carly Morgenthau, trying to get her to stand down. And yes. I think this is interesting because usually I don't like this kind of scene because I think it trends towards the kind of Aaron Sorkin, particular kind of liberal power fantasy about winning an argument that I think the example of this that you and most of our listeners will best understand is the Zygon inversion speech from Doctor Who, where Peter Capaldi gives a wonderful performance on a speech that is pretty objectionable, both in terms of the ideology.
I love that scene a lot, but it does not age well.
It does not age well, and what I object to is not so much the ideology espoused, which is frankly not very clear, since it kind of skates between, like, being anti-war and being anti-doing literally anything at all, or at least anti-direct action. This scene with Sam and Carly could have been that, but it did not come off as that. It came off as, like, Sam is trying to meet Carly where it's at, and it's a lot to do with the way it's framed. Because, like I said, the Aaron Sorkin way of writing this is that it's a power fantasy about winning an argument. It's about this idea of, oh, well, there are extremists out there, and it's scary to think that you would not be able to reason with people, but what if you could? And, like, that just sort of assuages anxieties about there are people out there who you can't reason with, or God forbid that there are people that you think are extremists, but actually they're the ones that are in the right. And I think that it does a good job of showing with some specificity, not I think quite enough, but some specificity, how and why Carly has gone too far with that, while treating her position as having integrity.
Yeah. I think the thing that really got me about this conversation, and why I think it works better than a lot of these similar ones, is that it felt a lot to me like Sam was... I mean, I know Sam says, like, I agree with you, I agree with your cause, I just don't like the way that you're going about it. But having seen where Sam was 3 episodes ago, and his process of coming around to this position, it's not just that we get growth for Sam, but we also see, like, him slowly being converted to this cause. Because, like, if you're given that on face value, it is sort of a liberal fantasy thing to be like, well, I like what you're doing, I just don't like how you're doing it. Although, to be fair, I kind of am on Sam's side in this. I just don't think that blowing people up is good.
I'm going to talk about that in a little while.
But also, like... But knowing that Sam began in a place of, I don't like these people, I don't know what they're doing, like, screw the flag smashers, let's go beat them up. I mean, that's very, very, very reductive, but, like, still. To a point where he's like, actually, just to be honest with you, like, I think that you're right, and that everything you're doing other than the murder is right. And, like, and when she says to him, you know, the people that I'm fighting are trying to take away your home, why are you here with me instead of stopping them? He just goes, my sister is also waiting for an answer to that question. Like, he's got nothing to say to her. She's correct.
Yeah.
And he knows that.
Although, speaking of the sister, I think it's interesting that the sister was, at least briefly, they kind of pulled out of the punch on this, but at least briefly reduced to the role of, like, someone's holding a gun to her head and Sam's gotta save her. And I think that rubbed me the wrong way since, like, you know, since the plot actually kicked into gear, she hasn't actually figured in it. And I think that's an issue of, like... the black woman is in the plot to be, like, the black guy main character's moral chain and, like, represent stuff. So, like, I think that's one aspect in which this show seems to be, like, not quite living up to its potential.
How great is the line, my world doesn't matter to America, so why should I care about its mascot?
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
They keep talking about destroying the shield. I wonder if that's going to happen.
They do.
Yeah.
I'd be all for it. Maybe that's why they brought Wakanda in. Maybe that's why they brought the Wakandans in, because they'll repossess the vibranium. They'll just be like, it belongs to us now. I was talking to my friend Lynette about this, and she said that she read somewhere, and, like, this is one of those, you know, I read a take and I really like it kind of situations. She said she'd like to see it sort of devolve into, like, a Mordor-like quest to chuck the shield into a Wakandan volcano. So they just march their way into Wakanda and then drop it down in there.
Yeah, it's like Sam's going to, like, a great deal of difficulty and, like, expense to do all this, and Zemo's like, you know, the shield is purely symbolic. It's not imbued with magical powers or anything. You can just put it in a closet somewhere. And it sounds like, no, it's gotta happen.
And one of them's even called Sam. Bucky can be Frodo, traumatized by where he's been.
Kind of got, like, long, nice hair.
Yeah, and Sam can be Sam.
He's got nice eyes. I'm getting sidetracked.
Do we have anything else to say about Sam and Bucky?
In our lives, yes, but I think we're good for now.
I do want to point out how glad I am that Sam's therapist thing has come back. I can't remember if it was last episode. No, it was episode 2, where we were, like, bitching and moaning about how everyone has forgotten that Sam used to be a therapist. And then in this one, he's just like...
up and it's just like, oh wow, what a gift.
In this one, he's like, I used to be a therapist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you did. Yeah, you did, my baby.
Is it okay if I talk about Carly?
Please go on. Please do.
Okay. Cool. Is it okay if, by way of talking about Carly, I talk about some stuff that has happened in Ireland in the last week or so?
Yeah.
I don't know if this news has filtered through to Singapore. Have you heard about Belfast as the goings on?
Shit, no, I haven't. I'm looking this up now.
Okay, well, disclaimer that I'm not a journalist. This is a Marvel podcast. I may get some things wrong, but I've tried not to. Mm-hmm. Okay, and like, I do have notes written out here, so I'll be working off those a little bit as well. So starting on Saturday of last week, just the day after we recorded the last episodes, there has been violence on the streets of Belfast in the way that there used to be. Mainly, though not exclusively, it has been teenagers who have been attacking the police with stones and fireworks, and sometimes with fireworks, and I said fireworks, petrol bombs. Some of these kids are as young as 12, and they've been spurred on, like, through WhatsApp groups and stuff like that by, according to the Journal, by criminal gangs. And there's no single cause for all this. Because there's a lot of stuff going on. Like, it's a whole context. Like, there's a lack of opportunities for employment. There's problems with the education system up there. There's a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of influence that the paramilitary organizations still have. But the main motive, as far as we can tell, is unionism, also sometimes known as loyalism, which is the position that Northern Ireland should stay in the UK. And this is all being provoked, like many things have been provoked, by Brexit. And it's something that, you know, everyone kind of fucking saw coming as soon as it was put to a vote. And it's something that a lot of people, politicians and Leave voters alike who live in England, just sort of fucking ignores because they don't pay attention to Northern Ireland or think about it very often. In the vote back in 2016, Northern Ireland voted to remain in the EU, but the overall UK did, of course, vote to leave, so Northern Ireland had to leave. And since then, the anxiety has been to avoid a hard border, especially for the delivery of goods, because that would bring back the Troubles. And it's been a question of, like, if Northern Ireland is out of the EU, but the Republic of Ireland is in the EU, but you don't want a hard border, how do you figure that out? And there have been lots of bullshit nonsense solutions, like a border in the sea somewhere. And these efforts to keep the border soft, so to speak, have been redoubled now that we need to move the COVID vaccines from place to place. And
yes, of course.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into the trade routes because, frankly, I don't know too much about it. But like, it's a whole thing that's been going on for years now, trying to figure this out. But in light of the COVID vaccines and measures taken regarding that, in particular, that has been the main provocation of the unionist violence. The gangs that are provoking this are strongly objecting to the idea that there wouldn't be a hard border between the North and the Republic. And from there, they've been spurring on a lot of people of all ages, but mostly teenagers. And it's not the first time that unionists have used minors as, if I can speak honestly, cannon fodder. And if you want to know more... Yeah, if you want to know more about this, I'd recommend reading about it on RTE, which is the Irish national broadcaster, and like for their failures, they are reporting on it with some frequency, unlike the English media, because the English media have not exactly hushed this up, but they just didn't give a shit for ages. Like, it was going on for 6 days and 6 nights before they reported on it, because, you know, it's a story about failures of the English government.
Right.
Now... I bring all of this up because the issues in play here are not the same, but they are adjacent to the issues that Falcon as the Winter Soldier is trying to talk about.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Ultimately, this show is about America and the American context. It's like this James Bond-style globe-trotting adventure, and it's about American imperialism. So even the bits that aren't in America, which by now is most of it, are still about America. It's essentially Captain America 4. Carly's whole deal consistently evokes borders and being opposed to borders and being anti-patriotism. But the show, I think, and I'm open to being disagreed with here, I think it's still struggling to be completely clear about exactly what it is that she means and what it is that she's fighting for. It's clearly being presented and coded as being opposed to American imperialism and military meddlement in some substantial way, and I think it's communicating that emotional core very well. But when it comes to the nitty-gritty of the ideology, it's all kind of tied up in, like, the blip, which is bullshit, and I kind of get a little bit lost. Maybe I'm just failing to keep track, but that's where I'm at with it.
Honestly, the way that she talks about open borders and a borderless society evokes very strongly both the ongoing refugee crisis and just the sort of like... I mean, this is a very post-Brexit kind of story, because what she says is, after everyone disappeared, we were all welcomed into countries regardless of the borders. So when we decided we wanted to leave where we were and we wanted to go somewhere, we were welcomed with open arms. People took us in. We helped them rebuild their countries. We helped them build houses, build roads, rebuild society. And now that all of these other people are back, they've decided they don't need us anymore and have thrown us out of our homes and onto the street and decided that we need to get out of their country. That is very much an immigration story, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's less tied up in... I mean, you're right that the show itself is about America, and that there is a lot of like tension between Kali and American imperialists. So there's like that in there. But I think the Flag Smashers are fundamentally a pro open border organization in the way that like current leftists are a pro open border organization.
Yes.
And specifically it's a borders thing. It's not like they're not just generally anti-fascist or anything. They're like, we believe in freedom of movement, we believe in free migration, and we believe in people caring for one another regardless of which country they come from. And that's very much an EU kind of, I mean, I'm not saying that is the EU, but that's the conversation that's being held around the EU and the concept of open borders and free movement of people and goods, and also like the migrants among us who are banging down our doors, you know, more than it is an American question, I think, necessarily.
Okay, yeah. That's really interesting, and that's really insightful. You're very cool and good and smart. Thank
you. So are you.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I think that all makes a little bit more sense to me when you put it that way. But yeah, I do think that Carly's whole deal is kind of coming into a different context for me personally. Now that there's a lot of stuff going down reasonably close to where I live about like borders or lack thereof, and like young people getting violent with it.
Yeah.
So, and while I don't think any of that makes it offensive, I think it kind of, my knee-jerk reaction to it, and maybe this is fair and maybe it isn't, is just is like, oh, this Carly Morgenthau carry-on is just Baby Bones' version of stuff that's going on. But then, like, I suppose it was always going to be.
Yeah. Also, I mean, like, the fact that she sounds Irish has something to do with it.
Oh, she does have red hair.
That too. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
I find that really interesting, though. I wonder how much of that was intended for? Because obviously, this show was shot well before any of this stuff happened. But then again, it's like we've known that it was going to happen since Brexit was voted on.
I don't think Falcon and the Winter Soldier fucking predicted it. I don't think anyone really it's not a situation where we thought like, oh, this is inevitable now, because most people really don't fucking want it to happen. But like the online conversations around these kind of things kind of trend toward an American context, especially. And like, look, I'm from Ireland, you're from Singapore, and we're doing a podcast about the spin-off TV show of Captain America because we both care about the Captain America movies so much. Like, American influence is all over the map. The American leftist way of talking about this, because of that particular context, is ACAB, which, sure, and that when you hear that teenagers are getting violence against the police, then I think that when I did that out in my notes, I thought, oh no, I have to explain why this is bad.
Right.
Like teenagers bashing on the constabulary. And like when this was tweeted out by, I believe, Andy No, people in his mentions, which like right-wing chud types, were kind of being like, yeah, the IRA are gonna show those namby-pamby Antifa how it's really done. And it's just like, shut the fuck up.
Oh god.
Just like a weirdo nerd Americans supporting the IRA, but specifically because they think they're Chads.
Oh my god.
Or that it's traditional masculinity. And it's just like, no, that's bullshit. And while I understand that in different political contexts, there's much less stigma around political violence, in an Irish context, when you hear that someone has thrown a petrol bomb at a police officer, your only reaction is probably going to be, oh shit, oh fuck, not this again.
Right. No, that's totally understandable. I see what you mean. I think this puts in context, in an interesting context, the extent to which, like, Carly is once again being set up as a really cool figure by the show that is consistently refusing to make us dislike her in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's a fucking Marvel movie, and again, I don't think that any of this has been made offensive. I think it's just suddenly been plunged into a very different context that most of the audience isn't going to pay attention to or know very much about. But like, that's very much going to be the context for me personally. Like, again, it is notable that, like, while it's along similar issues, she's on the opposite side to what I suppose the Unionists would be in Avengers Land.
Right, of course. Yeah. But, you know, like, the idea of Carly as a very moral figure continues to be, I wouldn't say bad or weird in that way. Like, I like it a lot. I think it's great. It is just so, this is episode 4. I should get over the fact that the show likes her this much. But I'm just very like, There is a bit where her friend literally says to her, I didn't think that there could be another Captain America, and then I met you. And then I was like, wow.
Yeah, that was a remarkable moment.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah. And the fact that she follows that up by saying there shouldn't be a Captain America, that S.H.I.E.L.D. represents all the people who were forgotten by history and it ought to be destroyed. Which is exactly what Sam said in the previous episode. I'm here like, oh, well.
Wow.
She's right. And also...
God. But all the same, like, it is very down on her violence methods, to the point that the violent methods, I think I was, like, almost a little bit nice about that scene last week, because reflecting on it more and seeing other people talk about it a little bit, I do feel like you could reasonably accuse it of being, like, this person started out right, but we need them to be a bad guy, so they're gonna blow something up now. And the thing is, and this is not exactly a defense of the show, but it is all the same worth noting that if you want to figure out who is in the right in a sectarian conflict, you don't necessarily want to answer that with the answer to the question, who was right at the start.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, and I think there is something to be said for, like, a person being sympathetic and going, quote-unquote, too far, and that not in any way compromising the value of the things that they stand for. As Sam says to Carly, I just wish you would stop killing people, but that doesn't make her argument invalid. Like, the fact that she's blown some people up doesn't mean that she's wrong. It just means she really needs to not blow people up anymore. You know, and I can get behind that. Yeah. The other thing I really wanted to mention about Carly in relation to her place as, like, a moral good figure is her parallel not just to Steve or, like, to Captain America as an ideal in general, but the bit where she's giving a eulogy for her mother figure, which is, by the way, a really beautiful and very sad moment. And it goes from this really beautiful, heartfelt, like, I remember this person and I love her very much thing, to her being like, you know, she believed in this, and, like, she believed in a world where we cared for one another, so go out and live accordingly. And it's a very rousing political speech, which is in itself beautiful, but it also reminded me really powerfully of Sharon's fabulous plant yourself like a tree speech, when eulogizing Peggy during the Civil War movie.
Yeah, which was, of course, from the comics originally.
Yeah, which is of course, I think, Peggy's speech from the comics. Oh, no, it's not. It's just a Sharon speech from the comics. Or Steve's speech? Yeah. It's from the comics. God.
Someone said it.
Someone said it, which makes it even more powerful. And wow. Like, you know, for all that we're not, I'm not going to be like, Sharon is the moral voice of the MCU, because she's really not.
Yeah, not at this point.
But that one scene was great in that movie the same way that this scene is great in the show. And I think that scene is very much a voice of moral authority kind of scene, where Sharon is being the proxy for Peggy, who is actually a moral voice in the MCU, and giving a really good speech about, like, what this person believed and how you can apply it to your life that drives the whole plot forward. as does Kali in this scene.
Do we want to talk about John Walker?
Do we want to talk about John Walker? Well, I didn't think there could be another Captain America, and then I met him.
Wow. America's Widows were very pro John Walker. Blood on the shield, that's cool. Dark, edgy. Love it.
Oh no. Alright, let's talk about our friend Johnny Walker.
Whoopsie doopsie.
Looking good, John.
Looking strong.
In the argument of whether being a superhuman makes you a supremacist, we have Bucky, Steve, Kali, and now new Captain America.
Yep. So, not a great track record, all in all. I think, not to circle around to someone else, but I think a very revealing moment in all of this is that, Bucky makes the point to Zemo that power never corrupted Steve, which is a very Bucky point of view, to be fair. As then Zemo says, well, there's never been another Steve Rogers. And then he looks to Sam. And that is partly making the point to Sam that, John Walker is not another Steve Rogers, but I think it's also making the implication neither are you.
Right. So don't take it, Sam. Don't you do it.
Nobody gets to be Captain America. Into Mount Doom you go.
When we first meet him in this episode, he's not terribly interesting. He's just the regular, I've come to throw a spanner in the works guy. We are reminded quite quickly that he's an asshole, in that while Bucky is trying to give Sam time to talk to Kali, he tries to manipulate Bucky into breaking up the party by saying, your partner needs backup. Do you want his blood on your hands? Which is a massively dickish thing to say to a person, especially to this guy. Go fuck yourself,
you can see Bucky falter, and as ever, Seb has a very subtle hand with these things.
Oh. Okay, before I get carried away, carry on. I think this episode does a really good job of balancing John Walker as increasingly a monster. And
I said, he's not shaving.
Yeah.
The bastard.
Right. But also him being quite a rounded human being and someone who's very, very real. We spend a lot of time with him just being the worst. And then we turn around and he, hits us with emotional vulnerability and we're like, oh shit. Oh no.
Yeah. Zemo says that anyone who would take the super serum is a supremacist. But I think what you're seeing with Zemo is, he's taking the super serum mostly out of a sense of insecurity. That he's got to be Captain America, but he's not actually a superhero. He doesn't have the super strength. But if he gets it, then he does, and he actually can fulfill that role. And, it turns out he's right, I guess. He's strong and brave, and he's here he is, to be fair, here to save the American way.
He is. Oh, God. I think it's especially interesting that it's sort of framed within the context of war crimes, because his whole point is he says, Captain America means something to me because I can finally do something that feels right, which is kind of interesting because when you look at everything that he's done up to this point, you're like, oh my God, no, this is all wrong. From the very beginning, it has been wrong. But to him, this feels like the right thing to do, in direct contrast to the stuff that he did in Afghanistan, where it is heavily implied that he just did war crimes left and right. And was rewarded for it by the US military, and they gave him medals, and they gave him accolades, and he's a good soldier because he's a bad person. And for the first time in his life, he thinks, I'm going to be a good person. And so I should take this super serum and become a super-powered asshole who smashes people in the face with Captain America's shield till they die.
Which, by the way, and I'm guessing that you noticed this, but that is a direct callback to the end of Civil War, where,
shit.
Steve always pulls the same move on Tony.
I forgot about...
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's like Steve's big like downfall, that he almost got pushed to that place. But even Steve at the end pulled back from that. And like that's as much down to franchise mechanics as anything. That it's not time to kill off Iron Man yet.
Oh no, but Steve wouldn't,
like,
though.
you know,
is the point that they're trying
Steve
to make.
Steve wouldn't, though, but he nearly did.
Yeah. And it is notable, I think, at that point that is the point at which he gives up being Captain America. You know, he drops the shield and doesn't pick it back up for several years because he nearly killed his friend.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Because he nearly killed his friend, and he knew that if he's in that place, then he can't fulfill that mythic role to bring it back to what you were saying last episode.
He can't do it and he doesn't deserve it. Yeah, yeah.
So it's a direct contrast between the actual person that John Walker is trying to essentially become and replace. That, like, Steve didn't do this. When Steve nearly did this, he quit being Captain America, and meanwhile John Walker did do this, as that, to his mind, is the moments that he truly became Captain America. So you're seeing, like, this mythic icon and character just get turned on its head and presented as the original thing.
Yeah. Should we talk for a little bit? I know we're running out of time, but still, quite briefly about the thing that makes him do that and how we feel about that.
I think it's bad. I think it's pretty dumb that they killed off Lamar so that they could advance the white guy's character arc, and I think it's pretty dumb that Lamar didn't do anything in this show except offer emotional support for that same white guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, black guy dies first is a really bad trope, for one thing. It's bad in two very general, like, first of all, killing off the black guy is a very racist trope that has happened a lot, and I think the fact that Sam is a main character and is still very much not dead does buffer that a bit, but it's still not great, and I don't appreciate it. I also think that killing off a sidekick so that the hero can go on a murderous rampage is also overdone, and if not as problematic, at least quite problematic.
Yeah.
I'm
getting the impression that Hollywood thinks that going on a revenge quest is bad.
Yeah.
It's come up once or twice.
Yeah. Like, I do think that this is defensible in a couple of ways. Not necessarily good, but, like, you know. And the one way in which I find it interesting within the sort of milieu of the Captain America myth is that, as we know, Steve always went off the deep end when it came to Bucky, who is obviously his sidekick character. Steve has done all sorts of stupid shit because Bucky has been in danger or hurt or killed or, you know, whatever. He notably killed himself because Bucky died once. And I think it is, if that was the intention, and this does seem to be kind of where they're going with it, it is interesting to see. It's sort of a compare-contrast thing, because on the one hand we say, okay, John has killed a civilian because his best friend has died in battle, and Steve never did that, so John is worse than Steve. On the other hand, it sort of recontextualizes this whole, like, I'm gonna kill the Red Skull and die in the attempt because my best friend is dead. You know, I'm gonna take down the whole American military and die in the attempt because my best friend was brainwashed. And now I'm gonna try and kill Tony Stark and maybe die in the attempt because... which is straightforwardly presented as heroic this whole time.
Yeah, it's a sign of good mental health.
Yeah. You know, and up to this point, it's just been like, Steve loves Bucky so much, it's so great, you know, it's maybe not the best decision, but, like, good for him.
Very heterosexual of him, of course.
Yeah, of course. But when you hold it side by side up to John and Lamar, you're like, okay, maybe he shouldn't have done that. Maybe this was always bad. You know, maybe this whole storyline was always a really bad one, and we should never have been enjoying it in the first place.
I don't know. I take your point, but... No, like, I think your point is a good point. It's just that I like the Stucky as a story, like, whether or not you think it's romantic. And I think ultimately this is a universe in which everyone punches everyone in the face, so it may as well be about, regardless of whether or not you think it plausibly comes off as gay, it does, of course, but regardless of whether you agree on that, it is, like, essentially a story about two bros who just care very deeply about one another, and it has a very sincere and well-executed emotional core. And, yeah. And, like, I am more about that than I am about anything else, but...
for sure. No, but I'm not talking about the specific, like, mechanics of devotion between Steve and Bucky or equivalents. I mean the very sort of machismo response to grief or fear for the person that you care about the most.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's not like I'm going to, my lover, best friend, sidekick, whatever, has died or is in trouble, and so I will help them and, I don't know, put them up on my couch and take them to therapy while they heal from their decades of trauma. It's like, my best friend's dead and so I'm going to kill somebody. That's the specific grief response of revenge or self-destruction that I think is being picked up on here. And I think whether or not you're willing to sit with the storyline depends on whether or not you feel like this is sufficiently deconstructive, or whether it's just they're doing that again. But it's bad now.
Yeah, I think... Yeah, I hadn't really twigged that there's a parallel there, and I think there's some truth to that. Maybe Lamar's going to get up again with a metal arm.
He gets knocked down, but he gets up again.
He gets up again. You're never going to keep Lamar down.
He's a cool guy, and he deserved better. Yeah. Even if he did talk John into taking the super soldier serum, which was maybe not a great move.
Yeah. Didn't think of that, did you, Lamar? Now you're dead.
No.
I'm victim blaming.
Oh my
god. And on that bombshell, will we wrap up?
Okay, yeah. I've got a couple further comments. Do you? Have any?
You go ahead.
Okay. Getting through this quite quickly. First of all, lol at the vaguely child predator vibes coming off Zemo.
Oh my god, yeah.
Not a fan of that. Like, I don't hate it. I'm just like, this is uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable, and it doesn't really go anywhere, but I don't dislike it either.
Yeah, it's fine. But the thing I found really interesting, not related to this, is the repeated zooming in on, like, the posters for the Global Resettlement Council, with the words reset, restore, rebuild on them, which I think is quite pointed, especially since in an era of COVID where we talk about going back to normal.
Yes.
And we even have, like, one of those, like, government speech clips where someone talks about fast-tracking the return to normalcy. And you think about the value of the normal versus the new, and, like, why it might be that people might be willing to blow up buildings to prevent a return to the normal. Which I found really interesting, especially in this context. And I love it when TV shows, like, anticipate a political context.
Yeah, it's a sin being, like, the number one recent example of that.
Yeah, of course. Also, finally, I just really love the credits in this one.
Yes.
And how they just killed the music on the credits. Which, fantastic. Love that very much.
Yeah. I do love credits music that undercut, that highlights a downer ending, as it were.
Yeah.
That's about it. Thanks for listening, everyone. You can find me on Twitter at Loafers Riots. You can find my website at marklaherty.wordpress.com. You can find my Patreon at Loafers. You can hear my other podcast on there. It's called Reading Player One. It's with my friends Jesse and Sam, my married lesbian Canadian friends, and we read Ready Player One. The theme song of this podcast is by me, and the art is by Carousel Unique.
You can find me on Twitter at Kimberly_Chu. I'm on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Chukayan, and on Patreon at patreon.com/Chukayan, where you can now read my undergraduate dissertation and pay me money to do this podcast.
Yeah. Now, you have previously expressed displeasure with my sign off, so I'm just going to say I don't want to suck Bucky's dick.